Hey Weirdos, this is Evan Jarvix with Make Oklahoma Weirder, and this is your local music vlog for the week. It is April 5th, Friday morning, and there's so much stuff that dropped today, so much. And I probably won't even get to talk about it all, because I also got to talk about some venue stuff that's happened. But I'm going to kick it all off with the Space Program, which you probably haven't heard of, and that's a real shame, because this is huge. Unless you're like really into Oklahoma City hip-hop and you've been following some of these artists who are involved, you may not know what I'm talking about at all, but they dropped an album today, and it is phenomenal. And just so I can get your attention right now, as far as the 2010s go, as far as Oklahoma City hip hop goes, one of the best hip hop albums of the decade, easily, easily. It's that good. Uh, I'm I'm not gonna. I'll eventually probably have a list, but uh, yeah, this is a collective of really well-known local MCs who have been assembled by a DJ producer for his dissertation project for college. And he's essentially submitting it in the form of a music album, which is well over an hour long, which I'm usually not a fan of albums that go on that long. I will say that listening to this thing is a bit of a marathon, a bit, but worth it. It's totally worth it, and it's hard for me to even suggest edits here and there because I feel like it takes a lot of different angles at some very important subject matter that honestly is not discussed that much, especially in popular music. And it's honestly, this is an important album, and I think as many people who can listen to it need to listen to it. The Space Program is 20 some odd MCs, like I mentioned, and part of the deal is they all need to have been a person of color in a higher learning institution that's more or less white run, which is pretty much most colleges, the vast majority of colleges, and uh, other institutions of higher learning as well. But I mean, we just had a cover story on the Oklahoma Gazette like last week that was talking about OU and its major shortcomings when it comes to race relations. And I mean, OU, for instance, is very, very big on their traditions. Most colleges are. But when you're big on those traditions, and those traditions are, like pre-civil rights era traditions, they're probably going to be problematic at some point. And OU has had scandal after scandal with this, and it's like, we want to be surprised about it, but it's embedded in the DNA of how these institutions were built. And so it's an album that's sort of about that. It's sort of about the experience of being a black person who's been told their whole lives that if you want to make it, if you want to overcome your circumstances, you have to get that degree. And there's something to be said for getting a degree, and the album acknowledges that, but it's not everything that it's made up to be, because in a lot of ways, it's something that's supposed to set you free in some ways, and in a lot of ways, it's just more of the same trap. And it's just a really thoughtful album, and it's really, really pertinent to things that are going on that a lot of people just honestly aren't talking about. And if they are, certainly doesn't sound as good as this. There's yeah, there's a lot of really great tunes on this, but there's also just like a lot of great insight. The spoken word passages are really poetic and just sharp. And I gotta move on, but I just want to glow about this album, which hopefully I'll have a review for at some point, in some way or another, more so than this. But tspalbum.com is the only place you can get it right now. It's not streaming anywhere, and it's going for like $16.19, which may be a reference to something, I'm not sure. But Yeah, it's well worth your attention. And so, at the very least, go follow the TSP Collective online and stay up to date with what they're doing. They've already put out some material. You can listen to a single, catch a music video. Just be a part of this thing, because this is huge, and it really is one of the best hip hop albums of the decade. So, moving on, I got to talk about some venue stuff. Khaos House, which I've written about before and talked about before, was more or less, I mean, I've heard it quoted as raided by police. Whatever it was forcible entry without a permit, basically shut down the venue for the time being. The venue owners are planning on going to court over it. But in the time being, Khaos House is not up and running. The police confiscated things and applied certain charges that I wasn't there. I don't know, but it sounds like it's not atypical for the police to want to shut down DIY venues like this. Running a business without being organized as a business or permits and all that stuff was one of them, which I don't know. I mean, I've been there. It's all donation based, and there's people who don't even donate. But I mean, nobody sells anything. Anyway, I'm not going to linger on it too much. But Khaos House down for the count so far. We'll see what happens, because the folks who are behind it are big on rights and activism, and so they're going to fight to keep this venue. But as of right now, I mean, that's pretty much the last of the DIY venues in OKC, and we're just plumb out of them now, aside from the occasional one-off house show. Speaking of house venues, Orange House, I think it's called, in Stillwater. I've not been there, but it's had a lot of like punk type shows there, and it's having its last show, and I guess they're going to bulldoze it or something. Somebody's bulldozing this house that's had some really epic shows. So, sayonara to that venue as well. And I'm also going to mention Java 39, which I'm going to guess a lot of you probably don't know about, but out in, if you go out on Route 66 west a bit in Bethany, there's this little coffee shop called Java 39 that's been a really big deal for a lot of singer-songwriters, especially of not necessarily just folk music, although it tends to be, but singer-songwriters, a lot of adults, usually family-type people, where they can actually, go do a show or whatever at a reasonable hour and not have to deal with bars and stuff. It's a nice little community. I've gone to a few shows there. I played a show there once. And the owners of Java 39 are essentially moving away, operating a bit remotely, but the food element is gone. Everything that they offered as a coffee shop, it's now it's going to continue being a music venue apparently, but it's going to join the Mexican restaurant next door, which is interesting. I'm kind of curious to see how that's going to work. Sorry. And that leaves me with 1 minute to talk about everything that's come out, so of course I can't do it, but I want to mention Lone Wild from Tulsa. Their new EP dropped today. That's a good one. I want to mention Lost Highway, who sent me an advanced copy of that album. If you're into 80s instrumental, actually, there's a cool write-up in the Gazette. You can just read that. Read the calendar. The calendar of live music events. There's a nice little Lost Highway blurb on there, so check that out. There is a music video from Poolboy that dropped. There's a music video from Ciara Brooke that dropped, which is really nice, from one of her songs from her last EP, which was in my top 20 EPs, Messy Parts, which I think is one of the best tracks of the album for sure. We also got music videos this week from the Lunar Laugh and from doubleVee, who I'm really excited to see having a new album drop next week. doubleVee was in my top 5 of the year that they dropped their full-length album a couple years ago. Man, there's so much. I'm forgetting something. Yeah, there's... okay, I guess I gotta call it.